But we are turning very much to GAA for the next 45 minutes or so. Happy to bring in Jamesie O'Connor, who has patiently waited for us at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Jamesie, hello.
Joe, how are things?
Yeah, very well. So the scoreline is comprehensive. Cork 117, Limerick 225. That's an 11-point win at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And, worth mentioning, Cork had a 3-point head start after 16 seconds. So that is comprehensive. Is that pretty much how it looked in the balance of play as well to you?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, Limerick, once they found their feet and started to play it the way they play, move the ball through the lines and so on, they were just looking like the Limerick of old. And 4 points up at half time, having played into a strong breeze. Cork did some in a response, and were level inside 3 minutes. But what do Limerick do? Score the next 5 points and suddenly take the game away from Cork again. And from there to the end, it was, the game was just played on Limerick's terms. They had 12 different scorers, Joe. Look at my notes here. 220 from play. I don't know what they scored. I heard a stat 216 from turnovers, and just their physicality, their work rate, just their tackling was just ferocious. And Graham Mulcahy was corner forward and didn't score from play, but yet his willingness to work, to hunt down Cork defenders, just to stand them up in the tackle, wait for the support to arrive and force turnovers, it's one of the reasons why John Kiely sees the value in that. Why he started obviously today, and why he stayed on the pitch for as long as he did. And even the subs that came on all made contributions. Cathal O'Neill got 2 really good scores. We all know that he's a player that's really highly rated in Limerick. Pat Ryan came off the bench, scored, got a great score from the sideline. David Reedy scored, and I suppose really what we saw today was Mike Casey back at full back. Having obviously torn that cruciate, unable to regain his starting position, but he didn't put a foot wrong at full back, and that released Dan Morrissey obviously to the half back line. He was rock solid on one flank. Burns was man of the match and absolutely outstanding on the other, and it meant then that Kyle Hayes is operating in the full forward line, with his ball winning ability, with his pace, his athleticism, his willingness to just put the head down and run straight at you. It gives Limerick something different. And Cian Lynch didn't have to be great today. Got 1 score, Joe, off his knees in the second half, which just has you're looking around, shaking your head at the skill level. Gillan was good today in patches without, again, having to be really, really outstanding. And they just looked like the complete team. And if people were wondering, had they dropped off a level during the league, they gave their answer this afternoon, and it was pretty devastating at times.
Well, the league is very much the league. It's especially true in hurling, whatever about football, but it's especially true in hurling. And right across the league with Limerick, very rarely we saw them play with their All-Ireland final team or anything close to it. I think we saw, was it 13 of the 15 this afternoon? So, look, maybe the squad doesn't stretch on forever, but that first 15, 16, 17, 18, they're as good as ever and seem to be as hungry as ever. For instance, of the 225 today, 220 was from play. And of that 220 from play, 216 came from turnovers. They absolutely killed Cork on turnovers.
They did, yeah, and just the tackling, and you just look at what are they doing, but it's the physicality, like that. They manage to hold you up, or you half get around them, but straight away there's another Limerick player converging, and it's that willingness, to obviously Paul Kinnerk and Kiely place huge emphasis on it, but they have more value in the turnover or forcing the Cork guy back than they have in an exceptional score. That's obviously the currency in their dressing room, and it's that's desire, Joe. That's intensely, that's your culture, and that's clearly set out in stone, and the standards haven't dropped. If anything, they've been reset, and look at it's 3 in a row. That's the target, and very much it's in sight. Obviously there's a lot of hurling to be played yet, and still injuries are maybe the one thing that might derail them to key players, but certainly look at 1 to 18. They have the reserves, and they'll obviously have guys to come back. Peter Casey making his way back from injury, and it's a nice luxury for John Kiely to have.
From a Cork perspective, I mean, they may well be talking about this championship season as we're going to play Limerick twice, maybe a third time. Let's see who ends up in the Munster final, or see how it all plays out. But certainly they are looking at Limerick as the standard and trying to bridge that gap. Now, they were beaten by 16 points in the All-Ireland final. today, and it's an 11-point gap. You take away the first 16 seconds, it's a 14-point gap in front of a raucous Porky Queeve. Eddie Brennan tweeted midway through the second half, "Blow it up, it's boys against men." Cork haven't closed the gap at all here.
They haven't. No, they certainly haven't found the answers to unlocking the problems. Obviously, the Limerick present for them now. I suppose after half time, in fairness, they did summon a response. They got the first 4 scores, but the second of those, Seamus Harney put a brilliant ball across for Shane Barrett, and Nicky Quaid pulled off, a brilliant save to deflect it and put it over the bar. But Barrett needed to be hitting the deck with that. He needed.
It was a great height. It was a great height for Quaid.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, listen, brilliant reflexes from Nicky, but he shouldn't have been in a position to make that save. And Jack O'Connor flashed one, narrowly past the post again. I think there was maybe 56 minutes gone, and okay, there was still probably 8 or 9 points in it at that stage. But they need to be taking all those chances, and there were 1 or 2 other occasions when you reckon that, I thought that, listen, Cork, they have to get goals. They have to keep going. They have to look to draw the man maybe and wait for the runner coming off the shoulder or look for more. And they didn't. They were content again to tap it over the bar or to take other options, and that's something that they have to look at. But you don't just go out, Joe, and pick ball-winning half-forwards off trees. And Limerick have those in Morrissey. They've got it in Hagersey, in Kyle Hayes, in Keane Lynch. And Cork just couldn't get any traction on their own puck out. They went short, and then Limerick quite happy to give the ball to the full back line, but then pressured, and it went back to the keeper, and then he went long, but there was absolutely zero change from it. Burns and Morrissey were just totally dominant on that second ball, or that long delivery, and they effectively had no real platform from which to play. Now they still scored 117, but as I said, you don't just manufacture these ball-winning half-forwards, and teams that win All-Irelands invariably have them. Kilkenny obviously had them for years. You know what I mean? Martin Comerford, you can go back to John Hoyne, guys like that. Richie Power, Henry, obviously, Eddie Brennan. They were all able to win their own ball, and Cork just don't seem to have those type of players. And the middle third, even Will O'Donoghue, just the enforcer, just the physicality, the work rate. I mean, there was one point there where, we know Mark Coleman is quick, and Coleman took off up along the sideline here in front of me, deep into the second half. And O'Donoghue was after him, bursting a gut, closing the gap. And again, Coleman forced him to play a ball that I think was intercepted. And, but if Will O'Donoghue doesn't burst the gut and expend that energy, Mark Coleman has time to pick out the pass. And that was the biggest difference for me, that, the work rate between the teams, and the Cork forwards. There's no way of putting this any other way. They just don't work as hard, as remotely as hard as the Limerick forwards do. And just watching some of the RTE footage on the player here, Joe, I think they highlighted that Limerick were effectively able to work the ball almost the length of the field without a glove being laid on them by Cork, and clearly, that's not going to get it done against the champions.
That's very frustrating if you're a Cork fan hearing that. There's no reason as to why Limerick should be working harder than your forward line.
There isn't, no. And sometimes, you're looking at it and you're saying, is that just tokenism? There's a half-hearted effort maybe in the tackle. And you look at Graham Mulcahy, probably the smallest man, on the field, and yet, and consistently, under Kiley, anytime Graham Mulcahy is played, it's, he sometimes sets the tone in terms of his willingness just to put his body on the line and force turnovers and put the hard yards in, and really, it just doesn't seem to be in the makeup of some of these Cork forwards. And look, at they're good players and they're talented and they're very, very quick and very, very skillful, but there's more to the game than that. And Limerick have that in their DNA.
Yes.
And that willingness to work hard just doesn't seem to be something that Cork possess enough of. And maybe look at it, the Brian Cody mantra sometimes, Joe, is you got to, if the other type of players you need, you got to go out and find them.
Yeah, and it's a boring point and it's a stating the obvious point, but it does have to start with hard work in hurling. It's such a wild game. It's about the small moments. You have to win as many of those moments. And the Mulcahy point is a good one to make, because there would be a temptation to look at the size, just the physical size of Limerick, and say, well, how can anyone compete with that? But Mulcahy bears out the point that it's about more than size. It's about a certain attitude.
Oh yeah, and listen, Graham Mulcahy has put the hours into the gym. You can see that. Listen, physically he's developed. He's looks a lot stronger than the wispy Graham Mulcahy that came onto the Limerick team. When he made his debut. But he didn't score. And I might have said it to you at half time that listen, he got no change out of Niall O'Leary. But I just thought in the second half, just his, when Cork obviously started so well, and as I said, we're level 3 minutes into the second half, and you're wondering now, are we going to get a game here? Maybe playing into the breeze might suit Cork a little bit more, and maybe they can get that run game going. But Limerick just shut it down, and as I said, I just thought he was to the fore, in doing that and not letting Cork out of their own half of the field. And if that stat is accurate, 216 from turnovers, it speaks volumes, Joe, for the work rate that Limerick showed, and he epitomised it.
It's hard listening to you to feel in any way confident that Cork will win the All-Ireland this year, push for an All-Ireland. I mean, you'd kind of write them off on the basis of being beaten so comprehensively at the Pork.
Yeah, well, Joe, look at the first objective of all the teams in the provinces is be in the top three to come out. And listen, Munster is going to be a bear fight. I mean, Tipp obviously showed something today down in Walsh Park that. They have their pride, and there's still a lot of players in that Tipp dressing room. Cathal Barrett, Michael Breen, Ronan Maher, Jason Ford, etc. with their Ireland medals, and and I thought I saw obviously pieces of it, and I thought Mark Keogh did well, and they're not going to lie down for anybody. I mean, Tipp obviously have a storied rivalry with Cork. They've obviously a huge rivalry with Limerick. Clare obviously go to Thurles, next Sunday. Massive game for both counties. So, I mean, look at, Cork. That's Cork's first priority. They've got to win at least 2 matches, make sure then that they're in the last 6, and from there, then I mean, that gives you a chance. That gives you time to maybe iron out some of those deficiencies. Maybe go back to the drawing board, but just. At this point in time, Darragh Fitzgibbon, after some really brilliant stuff during the league, got a point in the first half, no real impact on the game today. Yeah. Mark Coleman again, minimal enough impact.
And who was centre back, James? Was it Coleman?
Yeah, well, Ger Millerick attached himself to kind of Keane Lynch, and Coleman was centre back, but at times he was out in the wing, and okay. It was just. The game just seemed to be played on Limerick's terms. Kyle Hayes at times kind of came out in the first half. Kyle Hayes was kind of out operating as centre forward, and Damien Cahalan was effectively playing centre back with Sean O'Donoghue was on Galan, and Niall O'Leary on Graham Mulcahy inside. But then the second half, there was times when Hayes was almost playing corner forward, and Coleman was kind of out at centre back. So, Limerick or Cork obviously had their matchups, but just the quality of ball coming in. Into that Limerick forward line, was superb. But the reason it was superb was because invariably the Limerick players had time to get their heads up and pick out the right pass. Whereas at the other end, it's always pressurized ball, and if you're playing the Limerick full back line, you can afford to attack the ball because it's the pressure's been applied out the field, and that makes their jobs easier.
Yes, everyone's on the front foot. So almost the way you're kind of presenting it, there's a degree of where when Cork have the ball and they're building out from defence, the Limerick forwards smell opportunity here and a turnover here, akin to Liverpool and gegenpressing. When the Limerick defenders have the ball, the Cork forwards are almost thinking, I suppose I have to go and close this guy down now.
Well, and maybe that's been a bit harsh on the Cork forwards. I mean, there were occasions when Cork did apply pressure, but Limerick too are so efficient, so well drilled, so prepared that if Mike Casey takes a short puck out from Nicky Quaid, it's the second ball, Joe. It's ping to hand. You know what I mean? It's out to Will O'Donoghue or somebody who's made themselves available. Suddenly there's a guy coming off the shoulder. Dan Morrissey's on the sideline. It's popped out to him. He's time to get his head up and pick a pass to somebody. So you got to give Limerick huge credit too for the level at which they're executing, Joe. I mean, this is we sometimes underestimate just how good and how skillful what they're doing is. I mean, picking out passes that are sticking to hand to guys on the run. They don't have to break stride. Clearly, they train that way, and that enables them to play that way. And obviously, Paul Kinnerk is the architect of it, and what a coach he is. And as I said, look at it, they weren't scoring goals up to last year's championship. they obviously corrected that.
Yeah.
And even the second half, Gallan had one that he flashed narrowly over the crossbar that could just as easily have been, you know, nestling in the top corner. So that threat is still there. And obviously with Hayes up front, he gives them something different, a different dimension. So yeah, look at. They're the team, Joe.
Yeah.
If we had any doubts about it, they're the ones that they all have to beat. And
Yeah.
Liam Cahill will have no doubts about how difficult the challenge will be next Saturday night in the Gaelic grounds.
So to be fair then, because this all might sound a touch harsh on Cork, today is just a reinstatement of the qualities of Limerick. Today's more about, and the gap between these two teams, it is far more about Limerick's brilliance than the shortcomings of Cork. That'd be the fair way of putting this?
I think so. I mean, listen, look at Cork supporters and Cork hurling men will probably, you know, they won't have been happy with today, you know, and obviously the way it went, and you know, but look at Kieran Kingston can only work with the players that he's got, and these are probably the best players in Cork, and maybe people might feel that, you know, Joe Mahoney needs to be further up the field, or maybe needs to be centre back, or Mark Coleman needs to be shoved forward, you know, maybe Darragh O'Leary, you know, might come in the edge of the square, but I didn't think Demi Cahalane did a whole lot wrong today. It's just the middle third, Joe. I mean, that half back line, Burns was just imperious at wing back. I mean, you know, and even when Cork were coming at them, he got a phenomenal point, you know, from play, and just literally won almost everything that came down his side. Dan Morrissey on the other wing was every bit as good, and obviously O'Donoghue and O'Donovan. It's not that they're particularly stylish or that they kill you with skill, but what they do in terms of just the simple things and the defending and you know, doing the donkey work, you know, and then you've obviously got Hagerty, who looked back to his best today, and Morrissey working incredibly hard on the wing. So the middle third, they have the players, they have the athleticism, they have the physicality, the power, the strength, and it makes it very, very hard to play through that middle third with the attributes that team has.
Yeah, Burns was a deserved man of the match. Scored some brilliant long-range frees as well when Cork had started so well, and Limerick just needed to steady the ship. And then, as you said, any ball that went in, I'm not sure what height he is, but he just looks like he's impossible to beat in the air.
He is, yeah. I mean, and that's the one thing again. And again, you know, it goes back to Paul Kinnerk and coaching. I mean, you know, Kilkenny for years obviously dominated the, you know, aerially. They were so good in the air, but you know, Kinnerk obviously I think has coached Limerick, you know, in terms of breaking it down. You know, how do you compete for a ball in the air? And Limerick now are arguably every bit as good as Kilkenny were. And you know, when you're Diarmaid Burns and you're 6'5" and you're Gearóid Hagerty and you're 6'5" or 6", and you're Kyle Hayes and you're similar size, and Dan Morrissey isn't small and the other wing either. You know, it's a big help, and they have that physical advantage as well, and they make it count. And you know, puckouts obviously are so important, shots are so important, turnovers are so important, and I think you look at all those three, probably the three most important statistical categories. Limerick win those hands down, and they certainly won them hands down today.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's just no easy way to beat them. Gearóid Hagerty, 6'5". It's funny I mean, he's like, his physique is just phenomenal. And then when he takes off his helmet to be interviewed, it's like someone has photoshopped a different head in him. This baby-faced assassin, you know. You forget, like, some of them are so young. And then, like, there's a moment where Cian Lynch, who was awe-inspiring in the All-Ireland final, as you said today, you know, it wasn't a spectacular Lynch display. It was a stitching it together kind of a day for Lynch. But then, like, he goes and scores a point off his knees, you know, like he's genuflecting and whips one over, just to remind everyone I'm here too.
Yeah, and again, the thing with Cian Lynch is, you know, his just willingness to do, you know, Joe, the hard work. You know, he's always tackling. He's, you know, he's winning the dirty ball, and you know, you just get the sense that you know, that there's no egos in that team. That they play for each other. They play for the jersey. And you know, if you're not putting it in, you don't play. And you know, successful and Ireland winning teams have that. You have to have that, and Limerick have it in spades. And you know, Lynch, as I said, was as good as he needed to be today. You know, I remember been down here in Páirc Uí Chaoimh for the Munster final last year, and even the first half when Tipp were on top, I thought himself and Kyle Hayes were the two guys that were looking to take the fight to Tipp, and you know, he wanted the ball, he demanded the ball, and more than anybody else, I think he got Limerick moving. And we know, you know, the level the levels to which he can play, and obviously his skill level. And but it's, as I said, it's just his honesty and his work rate and what he brings to the team in that department. He's just a perfect team player.
If people didn't catch Waterford Tipperary at Walsh Park, and I know you caught bits of it, so Tipperary started brilliantly and kind of really looked like they were on to do something against Waterford, and led by 5 at the break, and then Waterford came out with a blistering start to the second half and scored goals and pulled away, and you thought, well, that's game over. But to their credit, Tipp came back again and brought this thing right to the wire, and in the end Waterford tacked on a few late points and they won by 4, the final score being 224 to 220. So I suppose what you would take away from this game, Waterford were sloppy at times, they struggled in their own puckouts, they had a couple of bad wides in the first half in particular, a lot of misplaced passes, and then improved as the game went on, Gleeson off the bench. But what the takeaway almost is actually, we've all discounted Tipperary just a touch too casually perhaps. Yeah,
well, I felt, Joe, coming in that Tipp were going. There was going to be a response from Tipp, because there's a lot of pride, I'm sure, in that dressing room. Look at Tommy Dunn is involved in the backroom team. Tommy's as good a coach as probably there is in the country. And as I said, look, there's a lot of All-Ireland medals in that dressing room. And okay, they've lost obviously huge leadership and huge players in Brennan Maher, Paddy, and obviously Seamus Callan isn't available. But Bonner was back. And as I said, look at Ronan Maher, Cathal Barrett, Jason Ford, go right throughout the team, Seamus Kennedy, Barry Heffernan. They're good players. They've won a lot of medals, and they weren't going down today to Walsh Park without hope. And I genuinely believe that they felt that, look, if they could get a start and quieten that home crowd, that they weren't going to be far away. And I mean, like, Waterford obviously summoned a response, and the impetus that Gleeson and Jamie Barron gave them off the bench, in that second half was huge. But Waterford, frittered away a lot of chances, Joe. I mean, when they were on top, I came to Galway last night. They didn't make it pay on the scoreboard, and obviously Mark Keogh's goal, later on gave Tipp a real lifeline. And Tipp could have got something out of the game, and Waterford would have been kicking themselves. But at the end of the day, for Waterford, look, it was job done. On to next Saturday night. Let's have a crack at Limerick. And what a game that's going to be in the Gaelic grounds, Joe.
Yeah, well, on the basis today, Limerick will now go in red hot favourites, but Waterford will improve. So that is just going to be a cracker. We are going to hear from Henry Shefflin in a few moments' time. For anyone who didn't catch the game yesterday, Galway were up by 6 points with 7-8 minutes on the clock. Lee Chin got the final 4 scores of the game, so a draw. What would you say about Galway's first outing under Shefflin? What did you see from them finally?
Well, Joe, I would say it was the longest bus journey home that some of those guys were ever on, because how they left Wexford Park without the 2 points last night is a mystery to me. Again, listen, they've only themselves to blame. I mean, clearly on top in the first half. Obviously the wides, some of them easy chances that should have been converted. Goal opportunities. Brian Concannon had one. Again, Joe, we speak about hitting the deck. He flashed that over the bar. Conor Whelan had one that maybe he should have put away. And Joseph Cooney, I don't know if you remember, intercepted a pass, a Wexford pass, halfway through the second half. He'd Conor Cooney inside him. Ollie Kenning obviously is in the studio with us, and Ollie was furious, and I couldn't understand Joseph Cooney, who played well, got a couple of great scores from play, elected to shoot, and he was shooting even from outside I'd say the 21, and Mark Fanning would probably have saved it as it was. Matthew O'Hanlon, I think, blocked it with his leg, but like, he should have just drawn the man, slipped it to Cooney, and you'd imagine that would have been it, game over. But look, a lot of credit to Wexford, because not playing well, they hung in there, they showed a lot of character, a lot of heart, and obviously Conor McDonald's goal gave them the lifeline. And the decision, obviously, Conor Cooney, that free that was overturned, I thought it was the right call. Again, Ollie wasn't happy with that in the studio, but again, it gave Wexford the opportunity. Chin, in fairness, put over a great score from play, and even the very last passage of play, I mean, did Garrod McInerney need to foul? Was it Damien Recker or Simon Dunn? I think it was Damien Recker that was sallying forward. Again, if Wexford are good enough to work the score from play, fair enough, but to give them a free puck, and then again, credit to Chin, because he nailed it. Henry couldn't have been happy with it. And as I said, I would say he was desperately frustrated, at the possession they had, at the number of shots that they managed to get off, that they didn't take the 2 points. And, really, sometimes, Joe, someone wins the draw. I think maybe Dennis Walsh said that in the paper this morning, and certainly Wexford won that draw. And were by a mile, I'd say, the happier side, in Wexford Park last night.
Okay. Jamesie, appreciate the time. Great to have you with us from Porky Queeve there. Thanks so much.
Cheers, Joe. Take care.
Cheers. Jamesie O'Connor there, who watched Limerick beat Cork very comfortably in the end at Porky Queeve. We're going to take a very short break. Andy Moran was talking to Máire Treason-Callaigh after Leitrim beat London in Ruislip. It was touch and go for a while. In the end, 4-point win for Leitrim. We're going to hear from Henry Shefflin as well, speaking after last night's draw. We will hear from both Waterford and Tipperary managers, and Paddy Maher, who was at the game for us at Walsh Park. Waterford beating Tipperary 224 to 220